Destigmatize Mental Health Podcast. I am here with Andrae Gonzales. Andrae, thanks so much for coming. Again, for those that are just tuning in, my name is Ramon Sanchez. I am a licensed clinical social worker out in California, out in Bakersfield. And I do these podcasts to go ahead and honestly, just a fun passion project. But right here, I actually have Mr. Andrae Gonzales. Andrae, how are you, sir?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So, again, before we go ahead and get started, I just want to go ahead and just kind of let everyone know that whenever it comes down to candidates, I invite candidates all the time. This is not an endorsement of any kind. When I do an endorsement, I would go ahead and let everyone know. But any candidate is welcome to go ahead and come out. And if they want to get vulnerable on my podcast, and Andrae decided that he was that he wanted to go ahead and come in. So kudos to you, man. I definitely don't make it easy. So thanks again, man. Thank you so much for coming.
You've invited me several times and for quite some time, and I felt bad that I hadn't gotten the chance to be on the podcast. So I'm happy to be part of it.
Life happens, Andrae. Life happens, and
life does happen.
Life happens, and you've been doing the political life for quite some time. As I stated in my intro, you have been a city council member for quite some time. You're a nonprofit leader. Mm-hmm. You're also CEO. I don't blame you for taking your time and not being able to do this, man. So I'm grateful, honestly. Tell me about you, man. Who is Andrae? And before we even kind of go there, I just want to congratulate you. The weekend that we did this recording, a couple days earlier, you launched your kickoff event, and you invited your inner circle to go ahead and be there with you. Uh-huh. So congratulations on that kickoff.
Thank you.
How does it feel to be able to go ahead and have those individuals, be present?
It's running for office in general is very, very stressful, and it's there's a lot of components to it. There's a lot of different pieces, a lot of behind the scenes stuff that most of us who if we're not part of the campaign, you don't see. And so when you launch, it's kind of a vulnerable moment. You're like jumping into the deep end of the pool where there may or may not be sharks, and you don't necessarily know what you're doing in terms of what might be before you in the future. And so it's a vulnerable experience, and I know that may seem odd to some of your listeners who may think, well, in fact, most elected officials or most candidates may seem like they are fully confident, maybe overconfident, maybe full of themselves, but in fact, at least for me, and from my experience, there's a lot of stress in terms of the amount of work, but there's also just a lot of components of feeling a bit nervous, and other pieces too. Imposter syndrome, for example. I feel that all the time. Like, am I really a city council member? Am I really one of 7 people guiding the city of Bakersfield? Am I really qualified to do this work? Like, that kind of sinks in, and you got to combat that. At least I have to always work against that and be very proactive in working against that mental model. So when I had the campaign event just a few days ago and had a kickoff fundraiser, and over 200 people show up, and there are close personal friends who've known me since I was a little boy, to people who are prominent figures in our community in various different sectors, it means a hell of a lot. It just overwhelms me with just appreciation, thankfulness, and gratitude for those individuals to endorse my campaign, endorse me, and say, we believe in you.
Just as a human being, they're endorsing you, man. I mean, and as you said, right? Like it's an interesting dynamic, because you've been doing this for How many years?
So I've been in an elected office for 15 years. So I was on the Bakersfield City School Board of Education for 6 years, from 2010 to 2016. And then in 2016, I ran for city council. And so I've been on the Bakersfield City Council for 9 years. So I've won 5 different elections at the local level. My first election for Bakersfield City School District was a big fight. I was, 27 years old and decided to run for Bakersfield City School District Board of Education, 152 square mile area.
Yeah.
There weren't trustee areas like there are today.
Yeah, that's new.
It was a huge undertaking, but built a grassroots campaign and won. There was 2 open seats, and I was the top vote getter. And so I ran for re-election 4 years later with the trustee area and won. And then when I ran for Bakersfield City Council, I ran against an incumbent and won with 22% advantage. And so, you're right. I've been involved in the political process in elected office for quite some time. Mm-hmm. But it's been, as a volunteer, as someone who's been, rooted in the community. These aren't like paid positions.
Nah, you're doing this because you actually care, not because you have to go ahead and do it.
Exactly. And so, it's a double-edged sword because, I think the community and all of us, at times we want fresh perspectives. We want new voices. And I'm trying to do whatever I can to make sure that we promote new leadership and promote lots of other folks to step up and run for office. We don't want the same faces for 30, 40 years. We want fresh perspectives, fresh ideas, particularly because our community continues to grow and evolve and change. And we want to make sure that we have the leaders who best reflect that growing and changing community. And so, I've been involved on the city council and the school board for 15 years, but my real personal goal has been to always try to stay rooted in our community and stay close to the people that I love and care about, and that I'm trying to serve. I'm aiming to serve.
Thanks for sharing that, man. I know that's the purpose of this podcast, right? To get a next level vulnerable. And I appreciate any candidate that's willing to go ahead and come onto this platform and get that level of vulnerable. With that said, I'm going to ask you to get a little bit more vulnerable.
Okay.
Who is Andrae? Like, just as the human. Let's take away the politician. Who are you? What are you about?
Great question. Well, I'm a Bakersfield boy, born and raised in East Bakersfield. I'm one of 6 kids that my parents had. I had the honor of being the son of Manuel and Rachel Gonzales, who were both born in right here in the Central Valley. My dad actually was born in Exeter. My mom was born in East Bakersfield. So I've been part of a large Latino family, 3rd generation. My dad was a community college counselor, Bakersfield College. He was the director, actually, of this program called Extended Opportunities Programs and Services. And he, more than anyone in my life, shaped my life and shaped my worldview. I got to watch him and observe him from a very young age, like 4 or 5 years old. Go to his school, go to his work at BC and see his work firsthand and see what he would do for people, for students, particularly those who were first generation college students who had no clue what they were doing, were very intimidated by the institution of higher education, and often were struggling financially and also struggling to get through the bureaucracy. My dad was there for people, guiding them along, getting them into classes, helping them with additional resources, grants or scholarships, and also providing that mentorship and counseling, sort of that father figure for so many people. Literally would hold people's hands to walk them to class or walk them to the bookstore and help them select books. He would take the time with people. So I got to watch that at a very young age. And I got to watch how many people were so thankful and appreciative as they grew older and into their professional lives, and attributed my dad's mentorship and his, care to their success. And that stuck with me. It to the core, it stuck with me. And, I was sharing the other night with some folks that when my dad died 10 years ago, it was very hard for me. It was very hard for my whole family. We just loved this man. He was like, he was our hero. He was our captain of the team. And when he died, it was a very, very hard moment for my life. I was going through a lot, depression. And the day of his funeral, I opened the Bakersfield Californian, and they had written a story.
It was a big piece
on him. And they said, they titled the story, Andrae Gonzales, the champion of the underdog. And, through all that depression and sadness, I felt this like undescribable sense of like warmth and just a feeling of deep pride. I don't think I've ever felt before. Deep pride in my father and what he contributed to this world and what he contributed for other people. And I knew, like, deep down in my heart, that's the only thing I really wanted to contribute in my life. Like, that's the one thing beyond anything else that I wanted to do with my life, is to uphold that mantle of being a champion for the underdog. And so, politics for me is a means to an end. It isn't an end in itself.
For you, you're saying that this isn't your career path.
This isn't, well, it's not something that, if I lose the election, for example, that's not going to get rid of Andrae Gonzales in Bakersfield. Like, right. I'm going to still be rooted in this community and still work on various different, either through nonprofits or through other projects. I will figure out ways in which I can best serve my community and continue to uphold that mantle of being a champion for the underdog, being a champion for all of us in this community. Many of us who don't feel like we have a voice. And so when you ask me who is Andrae Gonzales beyond the politics, for me, it's less about the politics. It's more about the call, this deep, and it sounds like bullshit, and I apologize, but it's like a deep calling that I felt since I was a little boy of public service. And actually, when I was little, when I was like really young, 4 or 5, 6 years old, I used to think that I was going to be a priest. And I would tell people, I'm going to be a priest. And then my tias would joke because they would ask me, oh, well, how many kids do you want to have? And I said, oh, I want to have 3 kids. And they would laugh because obviously in the Roman Catholic tradition, church, priests aren't married and they don't have children.
Right. So it's interesting you say that because, one, like, I feel like my inner therapist is like, I want to go ahead and challenge that imposter syndrome that you're talking about, right? Like, I want to be like, is that imposter syndrome where you're saying, oh, like, it sounds like BS, and to me, I'm just like, well, is it really BS? If you've had that mindset of that desire to go ahead and being a priest at such a young age, I believe that there are individuals in this world that really want to be civic servants. For me, and I'll get a little bit vulnerable myself when it comes down to like my political journey. But Andrae, I do this because of the fact that I am passionate about what I do. I don't get paid for this. Recently, I got paid for this, but everything that I get paid for, it's to go ahead and make it into a reinvestment to go ahead and continue to give back. My desire in being in politics has completely shifted. It's completely changed. It's no longer what it was. And again, I'll get a little bit vulnerable, but for someone that's been doing this you've been doing this for about 12, 15 years?
15 years.
I don't think this is BS anymore.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. I think, I'm very mindful of the context in which we work, right? The political context. And there's lots of folks out there who are running for office or maybe in office and will say similar things, right? And so I have a lot of friends who are very cynical about politics.
Oh, yeah.
I have lots. A lot of my friends, they don't even like politics, and so when they hear certain people talk or when they hear certain things, their natural inclination is that's nonsense, that's BS. They're saying it. So when I said that, I think I was just trying to communicate that it doesn't, it's something that has been said before, right, by others, and so I'm mindful that what I'm saying may not be heard by others as being authentic. It may, the cynic out there may say, yeah, he's a politician. Like,
Yeah.
we've all politicians say that, and I get it. What I'm trying to tell you is it's pretty tied into who I am. And
Yeah.
it has been for, like you said, for forever.
I feel like you answered this question, but it is my responsibility to ask this. Your inspiration when it comes down to going into civic service, was that your pops?
It was.
Is that what you called them, pops? Or?
We call them, we call them pops. We call them dad. We had a lot of different nicknames for him. Yeah, no, it was definitely. I mean, the way he cared for other people and the way he did it quietly, and he wasn't one to seek out recognition or notoriety or attention from others.
Any accolades?
No, he was actually engaged one-on-one with people. He was behind the scenes, but he did this work and he was consistent about it. And for me, that really left, not only just left a mark on my life, but also just instilled in me certain values, right, of what service does look like, and how that's tied to our faith, and what we're called to do, what I believe I'm called to do in my life, and also just what it means to contribute as a good human being on this planet, and how we support one another, and so I've spent a lot of time just kind of thinking through those values and try to distill exactly what those lessons were over time. But it's amazing because I'll think about his life and I'll think about some of the things I've observed, and even today I'm learning different lessons or seeing things from different perspectives and say, oh, I get it. Like one of the values that it's really important to me is, there's, and this is a critique on just society today, is I feel like everyone is so consumed with themselves lately. Like there's a lot of self-centeredness, and I'm guilty of it too. There's a lot of self-centeredness, and it's easy, right? Because on social media now, everyone has a platform to be their own reality star, right? You can go live on Instagram. You can post whatever you want, whatever idea or view you have or opinion you have on X, or you can make TikTok videos and show off whatever you want, whenever you want. And so everyone has this platform now. And what I fear is that we're all becoming more and more self-absorbed, consumed. And I believe in community. I believe that in order to make this planet, make this world a better place, in order for each and every one of us to have a better experience while we're on this planet, that we have to learn how to build community, how to be part of community, not just experience community, not just saying I'm living in this city and I'm going to, isn't it great to have this wonderful barista that is always so kind and writes me nice notes, or this librarian who's just always so funny, or not just experiencing community, but building community, contributing to community. Like it requires an act of selflessness to be part of community.
For sure.
It's not just about what I'm going to consume. And that's the other piece, is that there's such a consumeristic society now that we're all, running around, just looking at what feels good, tastes good, smells good, and we're more consumers than we are producers. And I want to communicate to, and for years I've been trying to communicate and trying to better understand that in order for us to build community, we all can't just be self-absorbed consumers. We have to be contributors. We have to build community.
Right.
So when we see issues in our community, when we see challenges that our city is facing or our state is facing, we can't just go to the manager of the store and complain, right? We have to also recognize at some level, right? And I know everyone's busy and everyone has their lives and whatnot, but at some level, we have to all have a recognition that each and every one of us, no matter who we are, whether we have a position or not, has a role to play in offering solutions and in being part of improving our community. And this comes up a lot. So when I think about my dad, I think about how he just in very subtle ways, he was paying his dues to building our community. He did it in very authentic ways. He did it in very quiet ways. Didn't have to boast about it. And not only that, but he also brought along his 6 children, and he tried to instill those values in all of us. And I was one who just kind of fell in love with that act of service. And there's, when I was young, I never wanted to be rich, never wanted to be famous. Like those weren't goals of mine. I wanted to always figure out ways in which I could help make an impact and change our community, improve our community, improve people's lives. That's what I wanted to do. And so when we look at community today and we see these challenges, the reality is, as much as people will call me and complain, right? Homelessness is the best example.
Yeah.
People will, and especially years ago when homelessness was really at its peak, people call me and complain, and it was like, Andrae, fix this problem. This problem exists because there's something that the city is not doing. That's the assumption. Or there's something that the city is doing that's contributing to this problem. But somehow it's the city's responsibility to fix this problem. And while I agree, I mean, there's lots of things that the city can do and should be doing, and I've been working on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's also a deeper responsibility that, again, we all have to help support and address this issue in a much more systemic, much more thoughtful way. And a lot of the reasons why homelessness has become the issue that it has become, they're multifaceted. It's a housing issue, it's a behavioral health issue, it's a substance use issue. All these things are contributing to it. There are lots of ways in which all people, everyone, you, me, the people who live in this neighborhood can contribute to solve this issue. Yeah.
It's a multifaceted issue when you think about it from a holistic perspective. And we'll definitely dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I do want to go back to that level of vulnerability that I was talking about a little bit earlier. This episode is about you.
Yeah.
But I think that it is going to segue back into you. But I was in politics. I think that's when you and I first met, whether you remember it or not. But I was running for a previous assembly member. I was his only intern at that time. He wasn't a contributing factor towards what I'm about to say.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the culture that literally led me away from it. I'm a political science undergrad. I love politics. I believe, and this is why I do this podcast, or at least, these special episodes where I invite candidates to go ahead and come in and be able to go ahead and talk about, mental health, because I believe that mental health and politics go hand in hand. Everything. I believe that the moment that you wake up to the moment that you go to sleep, politics plays a role. Even the tag that is on your bed that you cannot remove until you purchase, that's a policy that had to go ahead and get made, and that's in your day-to-day. However, I always felt like I always needed to be on. I called it being on. I always felt that I was having to be someone I wasn't to go ahead and ensure that I connected with the individual that I was talking to. I felt like I was being inauthentic. I don't know if you feel this way. I'm definitely not speaking on your behalf, but this is what led me to be as brutally honest as I am. At times, I know it could be a bad thing, but I feel like there are some good things about it. But for you, how do you deal with that? How do you mentally just deal with the notion of always having to be on for everyone else? And more importantly, how do you take care of yourself?
That's a great question, because I think that's something that I've been challenged with for years. I think, when I was younger, my early notion of elected office was that you always had to be quote unquote on. And so for me, the first question is, what does that look like? What does being on really mean? It means, for me, it meant, always dressing a certain way and being professional, being ready to engage people in a professional dialogue, and having, being prepared, having quality answers to people's concerns. So making sure that I'm, well-versed in, as many policy areas as possible, so that I could have a response, and have an answer for people. And just making sure that I was the most prepared person in the room. I know that I'm not the smartest person in the room by any means. But I also know that I'm a hard worker. And then I figure if I can just work as hard as I can, as long as I can, to be prepared, then yeah, I got to stay on. I think that has been a very draining approach to this work for me. There are many times where I just got burnt out and figured out that I cannot sustain my involvement at this level, in this level of leadership, particularly given, all the attention that a lot of the work that I do gets, right? I can't sustain it forever, because it takes up all of my time. Every night, every weekend is booked out. I need, as a human being, just some downtime, just to veg out and to relax. I need some time to develop a personal life. I need some time to just, and permission. I need to give myself permission to just watch, Rick and Morty, or watch, whatever it is. And because those are the things that I enjoy, just to get my mind off of things. It also makes me a dull person by just focusing in on work all the time. And so I realized that a long time ago. So what I've worked on was how do I do things in a way that is authentic to who I am, and how do I relate to other people, not the way they want me to relate to them, but the way that works for me. And that's really been my constant work, and that's been my focus for how I approach this work and approach this career and approach my life. So I'm not trying to be on, quote unquote,
Yeah.
as much as I used to, in terms of putting on a facade or trying to be something that I don't feel like I am.
Yeah.
I'm trying to really work on being present in the moment with people. 2, making sure that I carve out time and I put limits to my work, right? I actually stop work. I don't, there were years where I would run into the evenings, well past midnight, just doing work at home, and just all in the name of just trying to be that, like that social entrepreneur. Just the more work you put in, the better the outcomes later on. Yeah, that could work for a little bit, but there's also a lot of benefit to having limits, and there's a lot of benefit, and I read a lot of research on making sure you get rest and you get downtime. And so now sleep is more important to me than that extra hour of work, and making sure I have quality sleep, making sure that I have a better diet, making sure that I'm taking vitamins, making sure that I'm doing things that allow me to enjoy life, right? Taking a day off, spending time with friends, and giving myself permission to do all that. So that's really helped me kind of just become a better human being. And then not going through this thing where, where I see, in politics, you're right. It's easy to just kind of put on this facade, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Like, I work too hard, and I'm very proud of the work that I've done. I'm proud of the results, and I'm going to work to communicate with the voters in the community, to support me based on the results and the work that I do, not this superficial,
Yeah.
face that people put out.
Thanks for being vulnerable, man. I want to segue into talking about your professional roles.
Mm-hmm.
You served in various roles, worn various hats. What is your experience, or more importantly, what is the most effective strategy for destigmatizing mental health, both in the political sphere as well as the community that you've served up to this point?
Yeah, I think one of the best ways is for us all to talk about, our own experience, the fact that we all have, we all have mental health, right? We all have to be mindful of our own respective mental health. From a personal level, I shared just a moment ago that there have been moments in my life where I've experienced, depression. There have been moments where I've had, self-doubt. I've, definitely have felt imposter syndrome in certain settings, that feeling that I didn't belong in this certain setting because I didn't speak like everybody else. I didn't look like everybody else. I didn't, I didn't have the same, interactions or contributions that everybody else was making. And so, I think that from my perspective, I think it's easy for us to talk about mental health and, behavioral health in the abstract, and talk about, people with behavioral health challenges.
Right.
That's easy, and we hear that a lot. What I think is more important for us as a community is when we as leaders, or us just in community, talk about behavioral health from our own experience. So it's not the outsider or the other person, it's ourselves, right? It's talking about our own behavioral health.
As a city council member and CEO of a nonprofit serving adults with mental disabilities, how have these roles informed your understanding of mental health crisis within Kern County that could transition and translate as to how the 35th Assembly District will benefit?
It's a great question. So, from my understanding of mental health, the state and, really throughout the history of this country has not addressed mental health well. In the 60s and 70s, we were institutionalizing people with significant behavioral health challenges and actually committing people into state hospitals who probably should not have been there, inappropriately institutionalizing people. And so, in politics, they talk about this pendulum, right? The pendulum that swings one way and then swings the other. And people act and try to resolve one issue, and they swing the responses in one direction, and then that provides a reaction that swings the pendulum. So in the 70s, deinstitutionalization occurred, where state started closing all these state hospitals,
Right.
and started working on communities of care, right? So the idea was that counties would take on the responsibility of care. Okay. What actually happened was that many people who were experiencing significant behavioral health challenges were not getting the real treatment that they needed. You know where they got it? Prison. Lots of people who are dealing with behavioral health challenges were actually getting scooped up and sent to our prison system. In fact, over 30% of people who are in our prison system are actually being treated for some sort of mental health condition.
Mm-hmm.
So then you fast forward to Prop 47 and Prop 57, right, in the 10s. And I'm not trying to make a political statement about or against. I'm just trying to talk about the reality.
In general. These are facts. This is what's happening.
And you talk about prison realignment, right, where you reduce the prison population overall from our prisons. Many of the folks who were in state prisons moved to county jails. Many of the folks in county jails were released. So now you have folks who were receiving treatment in prison or in our county jail who are now released on our streets. Fast forward to late 2010s, and suddenly we see throughout the state of California a homelessness crisis. Now, again, there are a lot of reasons why we're facing homelessness. It's not just this one issue, but there is a corollary, and there is a significant kind of underlying issue related to behavioral health treatment and access to care that is really important to understand if we're going to understand the complexity of this issue in the community. So when you ask me this question, I have to take a look at what's happened in our history and then what's gotten us to this situation and how do we resolve it today. The way that I've tried to respond first and foremost was through the Brundage Lane Navigation Center. In 2019, fought like hell to push the city to build and to invest in a low barrier navigation center for people who are experiencing homelessness. Low barrier means people with pets, people with possessions, and people with partners would not be denied access to a shelter and could actually find a space there. We started with 150 beds. We bought the old Calcott facility on East Brundage. By the way, this was a very controversial issue. We had over 100 people who were against this thing at City Council, and in a 4-3 vote, the City Council joined me and supported building this Brundage Lane Navigation Center.
How'd you do that?
Politics. Politics. I mean, we pushed and was working it as much as I could. And we had a lot of people who were against it. You'd be surprised the people who were against this project. But we But, I knew in my heart that this was a critical need. And not just in my heart. I knew from the professionals who were actually serving the population, who were recognizing, who identified that this was an actual gap in the care in our local community. And so what we had before was we had a lot of people with significant behavioral health challenges who were not receiving the care that they needed, who were living on our streets, who were getting picked up only to be pushed back out into the street, displaced, building their encampment or building whatever little, safe spot that they had on our street, and then being displaced by either a property owner who got upset or an officer who responded. And I don't blame them. They have a business to run, and we got to protect small business as well. But, from the experience of the person who was unhoused, they get displaced, they move on to somewhere else. Meanwhile, the street outreach worker or the case manager from behavioral health or whoever is trying to help provide care for that individual is, trying to find them. Mm-hmm. And as they get displaced from place to place and move around from place to place throughout the city, sometimes throughout the county or throughout the state, that service delivery becomes very, very difficult. Because now it's not just about going and meeting the person. You got to spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours trying to find the person in the first place. So it's very complicated. So for me, the low-hanging fruit was, let's just focus on building this low barrier shelter so that people are sheltered. They're safe, number one. Number two, that we know where they are so that we can deliver services, whatever that may be, deliver the services that they need right away, and we know where they are. So we can reduce the amount of cost or time that it takes to actually find those individuals.
Right. Being able to go ahead and connect with whether it is nonprofit organizations that do assist, these low barrier shelters. There's so much that goes into all of this. Various parties, and ultimately it is more cost efficient to go ahead and take this approach in comparison to what it would be to incarcerate an individual.
100%.
And a lot of individuals that may not necessarily be educated or want an immediate solution, they don't really take that into consideration. And I get it. It's difficult. I definitely have to be in there myself. I have to be in the trenches to be able to go ahead and understand the complexities of homelessness. For me, as a behavioral health therapist, more importantly, as a social worker, I love getting into the nitty-gritty of things. And I love to go ahead and go into the riverbanks and to go ahead and look for the individuals, not as a form of being able to go ahead and spend taxpayer resources, but this is how you ensure that an individual that does not feel that they have had any sort of connection has that there's some sort of consistency in that individual's lives. And what I always ask people to go at where I have this conversation with is to be empathetic and to recognize essentially the amount of privilege that they've had throughout their life. To have a mother and father that would be able to go ahead and support them, to go ahead and individuals like that. Again, a lot of individuals don't have even that. So when we start kind of getting into the whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs, complicated issue, but essentially having someone that is consistently there part of your life is one of the most fundamental things that an individual can have. And people also do not choose to be homeless. Homelessness usually happens. It's usually a outcome of the symptom. It is an outcome that ends up coming from depression, anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, whether it is gentrification that ends up pushing someone out from a community, from a home that they've been at for so long, rent, price increase in rents. And again, I understand that there's a business component behind that. However, these are things that affect real people in real time, then that ends up pushing the individual to get to a point of, well, screw it. I'm just going to go ahead and utilize because I'm so overwhelmed. I just need to go ahead and feel something. And I always feel that people, whenever they're having a bad day, I will compare it to that. There must be a time that you feel that you need to go ahead and go to a local bar, to a brewery, have a drink because you have had such a hard day.
Mm-hmm.
However, you and I could do that pretty easily. But individuals that may have a very generational complexity of substance use. Addiction is hereditary. Individuals may not necessarily know that, and they could fall into substance abuse because of the damages from the previous generations.
Mm-hmm.
Very complex issue. The Brundage Lake Navigation Center that the City of Bakersfield has provided, as well as the M Street Navigation Center, that again, it's part of the 35th District, that is primarily funded through Community Action Partnership of Kern. I see firsthand the lives that those two resources have changed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one thing that I will say thanks. Like, I will say the decision to play politics in that moment has changed countless lives. And you are a pivotal individual that contributed towards that, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we opened the shelter in 2020, October 2020. It's going to be 5 years. And one of the things that haunted me and bothered me for a long time was, while we were building the shelter, there was a man who, on a cold night, winter night, died on the streets in downtown Bakersfield, in my ward. And, I think part of me felt guilty about it, that somehow I didn't do enough and I didn't work hard enough to prevent that. And that bothered me a lot. There was another story, though, in the shelter once we opened up, where a woman had gone into the shelter and she had passed away. But there she was sheltered, and she was with the staff that was with her, who loved her, cared about her. She went home surrounded by people. And while that is a very sad moment that she passed away, it was meaningful to me in a deep way that this woman had the dignity and respect in the end of her life, where she was around people and she left alone. Well, she wasn't alone.
She wasn't alone in
wasn't
comparison
alone.
to the first individual.
In comparison to the gentleman who passed away alone.
Yeah.
And so, now I appreciate what you're saying, but this work does have real implications on people's lives.
100%.
And I think my fault is that sometimes I think I get emotionally fatigued, honestly. And so I try to sort of just keep my head down and just do the work because I know it needs to be done. And because I can't, process all of the awful things that I see and hear every day in our community.
Yeah.
And I know that in order for me to resolve these issues, I got to get to work, and I can't sort of have to buffer myself from it. And so,
Yeah.
but you got me into a moment where I really felt it.
I tapped into some trauma, man, and some unresolved trauma that you've been holding on for a while. We're not going to get into the complexities of that, man, but what I will say is that the complexities of homelessness, that is a real thing. It's extremely real. That it's not a one size fits all type of situation. Homelessness within itself, it's a multifaceted, complex issue that requires various community members, professionals. It's not as easy as it sounds, which is why it hasn't, it's one of the grand challenges of social work. That's one of the things that we as social workers are really trying to go ahead and advocate for, to go ahead and try to go ahead and reduce that. And again, right now, we're pretty much approaching the hour, but I do want to go ahead and kind of talk into the next component, which is going to be the policies, specifically 3. Prop 1, Senate Bill 43, and Care Court. So all of that kind of gets into what we're going to be, into the complexities of homelessness. But what I will say is I appreciate the honesty that comes associated with the emotional fatigue, because I think that is where the strength of various clinicians like myself, clinical counselors, marriage and family therapists, clinical social workers, that is what we learn. But even within our profession, we're not built for that. Mm-hmm. We're not built to deal with these complexities, but we're able to go ahead and channel and process the real world impacts a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. It takes a very special person to be a politician. I really do believe that politicians are supposed to be the best of us. Whether that's true now or not, that's debatable. Mm-hmm. But in theory, that's what it should be. We elect that individual because they are the best of us.
Yeah.
In theory. Things have changed. However, we're built for that. Politicians are built differently. Civic servants are built differently. Nonprofit leaders are built differently. We all have our strengths. Doctors are built differently. And one thing that I will let you know is that's not on you. That death does not land on you. And I hope that you know that. But I do want to move on. 3 major policies. Prop 1, SB 43, Care Court. The recent passage of Proposition 1 that happened last year aims to shift billions of dollars into mental health and addiction treatment infrastructures, specifically focusing on housing. Some will say that it focuses on the most vulnerable. It will expand the use of mental health tax dollars, including treatment on substance use disorders, which was not the original focus of the Mental Health Service Act. Others will say that it will force counties to prevent funding for other programs, essentially cutting them entirely due to the focus on the housing intervention and the full service partnerships, while also cutting the early intervention programs, which focus on identifying the early identification component. Thus, that is going to cause a ripple effect into the long-term care issues. Mm-hmm. As someone who is running for state assembly, what is your perspective on Proposition 1's potential impacts, both the opportunities and the potential challenges in addressing homelessness and mental health, specifically in the 35th?
Yeah. Great question. So I understand, there are challenges and there are going to be some trade-offs, and the reality that policymakers are often stuck with are trade-offs, right? There's only so many dollars in the budget. There's only so much time in the day. And so we have to make sure that we're making smart strategic decisions in the future. I was in support of Prop 1 because I know the real need for housing and for additional supports for the most vulnerable. And when we have a community of people who are clamoring for some resolution to this crisis, and I get, there's different perspectives out there. Some people just want, people who are homeless out of sight, out of mind, right? They just want them out of the way. But other people really have a heart and want to see people out off of the street and getting the help that they need. And they're frustrated that in this state, the fourth largest economy in the world, that we can't find the resources, we can't have the supports to help people find a path out of homelessness. And so, I support because I really feel, as somebody who's been on the front lines of this issue for quite some time, I really felt and have continue to feel the sense of urgency to resolve this issue. Once we get people into the homeless shelter, the navigation center, we have to get them into permanent housing. That's not their last stop. And over the last 5 years, we've moved 500 people into permanent housing. We've built over 1,000 new units of affordable housing in Bakersfield, or will have built 1,000 units by the end of next year. So we're making progress, but it's just still so slow, and it doesn't meet the actual challenge that we're facing. And so we need additional support and we need additional resources. So Prop 1, I think, has the potential of providing those facilities, those housing units, and ideally, the support services to help us really address this issue in a far more substantive way. I do understand the challenges and the trade-offs and what might happen long term. And, as a policymaker, I want to continue to be part of this work and to stay close to it so that we can, as time moves on, that we can adjust to address some of those challenges in the future. With regard to, some of the other measures, Care Court, for example, Care Court was a great idea in concept, but currently it hasn't proven to be very effective. While there's like 8,000 to 13,000 people who may qualify for Care Court, I think there's only 2,400 or 2,500 petitions that were actually filed in courts throughout the state of California, and less than 600 actual cases that were Care Court cases that were actually managed.
Yeah.
And
let's focus on Prop 1 for now.
Okay, sure.
Because we are going to get into it. Care Court is a very complicated beast.
Yeah.
And I feel like we have to talk about that because of the complexities, especially for someone that may be listening to this podcast.
Sure.
And they may not necessarily understand. So let's focus on Prop 1 for a sec. So thank you for being able to say, like, hey, I was for it. I'm going to go ahead and give you the clinical therapist point of view.
Sure.
Okay.
We may have to do 2 episodes, by the way, because
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to focus? I mean, we could stop this one. I mean, we could go ahead and go into just going into the campaign and the city council work, and then let's get into mental health. So we could do 2 episodes.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Because I'm so sorry. I got to be in Delano in about 35 minutes.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and focus on just the final part. The final set of questions kind of focuses as your work as vice mayor as well as your future plans. As a city council member, what has led you to build the city's first low barrier homeless shelter. I know you mentioned what you saw. However, was there anything else that contributed towards that? And can you talk about how policy considerations as well as mental health went into the decision making of that project?
Yeah, so I try to stay rooted in the experiences of our frontline workers, those who are the professionals in this particular area, and the feedback that they provided me early on was that we just needed additional bed space in our shelters. Number one. And number two, we needed low barrier shelter. So, a lot of folks in traditional shelters were being turned away because of their pets, because of they have partners or they have a bunch of stuff that they want to bring along. And I get it. I have a little dog, and I'm very attached to this. She's like my little companion, Ethel. And if I was experiencing homelessness myself, I don't think I could just let her go, unless I had a somebody that I could really trust to take care of her. Just letting her go would not be a real option. And so I understand that. We have kennels now at the shelter, and they're all full. I mean, people are able to bring their companions with them, and that matters a lot. And so I was deeply committed to wanting to make this happen. We first had to get the funding, so we had to pass Measure N, the Public Safety and Vital Services Initiative in 2018, and I pushed for that as well. And that was really the precursor to Brundage Lane, because we didn't have the money. City didn't have the money, and so that generated the revenue necessary to start the work and have that question. And so, there were a lot of people at that time, and even today, who felt like building a shelter was going to be a waste of money, that nobody would go there, that we should there was a far simpler solution in just arresting everyone, or just moving them out of the city, because the assumption was they're not from here, right? Well, we know that, number one, that the cost per bed in prison or in a jail is like $78,000 to $85,000 a year. The cost of a shelter bed is $17,000 to $21,000 a year, far less. We know, number two, that people will go to a shelter if given the opportunity, and if you reduce the barriers, and if it's clean, and if it's safe, people will go. And what we have found, and I love to prove the cynics wrong, we have found that the first 150 beds within weeks were all full, all occupied. And in fact, it's been so popular that we've had to expand it twice. We expanded it once with 50 beds, then another 100 beds. So we have over 300 beds now, all occupied.
All of them.
From that shelter, we've been able to move people out into permanent housing. We moved over 500 people into permanent housing. So over 800 people are now in shelter, have a roof over their head because of the work at Brundage Lane over the last 5 years. The other thing is we created a recuperative dorm, partnering with Kern Medical, so that people who are being discharged from the hospital aren't discharged onto the street. By the way, it's illegal now, but they're not just I've seen it firsthand. People in hospital gowns in downtown Bakersfield or on Union Avenue. I've been with them, on Friday nights, on different times where I refused to leave a person until some agency came over to pick this person up and help them out. That's happened multiple times. We were able to build a recuperative dorm so that people can go in and they can recuperate, they can, convalesce in a safe environment, in a medically sound environment. They can receive medications from a professional, and they can get better, and then seamlessly enter into the congregant dorms. That is a huge plus. In fact, we're one of only 2 facilities in the country, 2 shelters in the country that have a recuperative dorm adjacent to the shelter. I'm very proud of that work.
Yeah, for sure. I know you're pressed on time, so I have to get you to commit. So we're good for 2 episodes?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. That second episode is going to focus heavily on Prop 1, Care Court, and SB 43. With that said, what are your future plans as you work towards the 35th district? Not just on mental health, but what are the specific legislations that you might champion? And if you could go ahead and throw a mental health trinket in there, then please do so.
Yeah, I mean, number one is the cost of everything is just going up and up and up and up. And in Kern County, Kern has been one of the few places in California where affordability really was prevalent. But even that is a challenge now in Kern County. And when it comes to home prices, purchasing a home, first-time home buyers, Kern County was one of the few places where people could actually buy a home in California, and costs continue to rise. I'm deeply, deeply concerned about this. I'm deeply troubled that first-time home buyers are finding it a challenge to actually get into their first home in Bakersfield or in Kern County. And so on the city council, I pushed for what we call our Bakersfield Community Land Trust. It's a nonprofit. We put $6.5 million from federal ARPA funds into this shelter, into this nonprofit, so that we can build and construct new homes or buy new homes and then sell them to first-time home buyers in Bakersfield. I want to continue that work and look for different opportunities for us to construct new homes and really focus them and dedicate them for first-time home buyers, for local families, not big investment corporations that are trying to scoop up homes and turn them around into rentals. I want to really focus in on home ownership. My big mission in life is to figure out how we can create better pathways, more tangible pathways for people who are experiencing poverty to exit poverty. And homeownership is one of those pieces. Job training is another. Education's another. And those are the types of things that I really want to focus on for Kern. The other thing too, just broadly, is I want to fight for Kern County and making sure that we are getting the resources and the respect that we deserve in Sacramento. I don't think that we're often respected. And I think that's a real problem. So it's time for us to level up as a county.
I agree. Something I just recognized that I didn't ask in the beginning, and I'll definitely make sure that I put it inside of the intro, was how do people find you? How do people find you on Instagram, on social, phone number? Email? How do people connect with you?
Yeah, so you can check out my Instagram, Andrae Gonzales, Andrae Gonzales. You can also go to my website, andregonzales.com, or you can call me, 661-808-4929 is my cell phone number. Those are the ways that most people find me.
All right, cool. Final question as we wrap up. Again, you committed to another episode, so I will hold you accountable to that one. Because those questions that I had, that was a key part of this episode. With that said, what is one key message or piece of advice that you want our listeners to take away about not just destigmatizing mental health, but going out to vote? Again, we recorded this in 2025, but whenever people listen to this, whether it's in 2025, 2026, as this election will be in November of 2026, what do you want that message to be?
I think the biggest message is similar to what I started with earlier, in that we all must find it within ourselves to be part of the solution. We can't continue to expect an elected official to fix all of our problems. We can't expect, someone to come in and save us, right? There is no Superman. We all have to find it within ourselves, the agency within ourselves to make a change. It does not mean that we all have to run for office or we all have to start our own, podcast or our own nonprofit, but find ways in which we can all be part of the solution. We all have to recognize that for better or for worse, no matter where you are in the political spectrum, we're all interlinked and all intertwined. And our community relies on all of us to play a part. And so my big hope as a leader is to encourage all of us to find ways in which we can contribute to a better society.
Andrae Gonzales on Instagram. Andrae, Andrae Gonzales, Gonzales. You can go ahead and find him on Instagram. He just gave you his phone number. Andrae, thank you so much. This was Destigmatize Mental Health Podcast, Season 4 special episode highlighting mental health policy and the state assembly race with Andrae Gonzales. You can share this episode and listen to past episodes of Destigmatize Mental Health Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Andrae, thanks, Ben. Look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you. Appreciate it.